Okay, hi, welcome to the next in the series of the Connect the Match Officials webcast series. Today we're going to talk around the law application for the breakdown. Myself, Gareth Thomas and Reece Riley are delighted to be joined by one of our full-time referees, Craig Maxwell-Keys. How's everything going, Craig?
Can't complain, Gareth. Suppose we're lucky that we've still got rugby on, so we can escape the four walls of the house, safe for lockdown. So yeah, I suppose that's a positive.
So where we are at the season at the moment, we're fully into the Premiership. We've got the Championship starting as well at the moment. So it's going to ramp up a little bit. Europe should be kicking off again fairly soon. We're in the middle of the Six Nations, so it's pretty busy, I guess, for you at the moment.
Yeah, lots going on, which is always nice. Lots of rugby, lots of clips. I say lots of talking points. Some of them unfortunate, but some of them just really good learning for everyone to get their teeth into, irrespective of the level. So yeah, lucky to be busy. Lots of rugby on our TVs as well.
Excellent, and it's saving grace for me that has been able to watch it. So Craig, into your 7th year now as a full-time referee. First appointment in the Premiership back in about 2014. Refereed since about 2006. Got some fair experience here. Again, I think we've got 87 Premiership games, so you're very experienced now. So you've seen quite a lot of breakdowns in your career.
Yeah, I may have even seen some of them correctly. Who knows?
Right, so what we're going to do now is we're just going to move into some questions around the breakdown and just delve into your knowledge really and get some insights from you around how we manage it and how we apply the laws correctly and what we're looking for. So I'll hand over to Reece for a couple of questions and off we go.
Thanks, Gareth, and thanks, Craig, for joining us. I just thought it would be great if you could start off, Craig, by summarising what your priorities might be around the breakdown, maybe for yourself as the referee and then your assistant referees as well.
Yeah, sure. So I think from my perspective, breakdown priorities, it starts off really simple and has that tackler moved out of the way. Until the tackler moves, nothing else really unlocks as far as I'm concerned. So that remains the number one focus at every breakdown, I think, and irrespective of level as well. I mean, after that, obviously, it can get quite complicated, but safety has to be there. So whatever technical detail we're looking at around the breakdown, players have to be safe in what they're doing. So yeah, but once that tackle has moved, obviously, we want any assistant tacklers to show a clear release. And by clear, for our definition of that, because since we get loads of camera angles and replays, one real-time clear release. So you have to go to slow-mo to prove it. And if you have to ask yourself, have they released? Then they probably haven't. So keep it really simple. If you can't instantly see that release, then assume there hasn't been one. After that, obviously, we're looking at the legal jackal, so players on their feet on the ball, and then that clear out. And obviously, we don't want that clear out targeting the head or neck. That's probably the biggest safety piece, is those players then that arrive from distance to try and clear that jackler out. So you can see how quickly we can get into the detail, but tackler first and safety are probably the big two. In terms of ARs, I know you mentioned ARs. I think they've got very little input, primarily at the breakdown. Clearly, again, they've got a safety remit there. If they're seeing stuff that's unsafe, they'll flag it. But the breakdown's primarily ours as match officials to referee. I think with the new interpretations that we've got, or I say the new ones, the refocusing on existing law, side entry, potentially assistant referees can help us with. So obviously, if they're stood one side of the breakdown and we're the other, they've got a pretty clear view as to whether that person's come in the side or not. So that would be one area that we'd expect them to get involved. I mean, beyond that, it's the cynical offences that somehow we as referees miss. So if someone's on the floor and they slyly slap the ball out the nine's hands as they go to pass it, stuff like that. It's the cynical acts that are really small and hard to see. But I mean, beyond that, that's probably where mine and the AL's focus would be.
Thanks, Craig. Some really clear, concise points there. I think Gareth might have something to add on that.
Yeah, Craig, just on that, you said around you kind of refocus for this season. What is it that's the top, maybe one or two things that you are refocusing on this season specifically, if there is anything?
Yeah, so that refocusing fits in with the keep it simple that I mentioned, and it's on the tackler. So they have to go east or west out of that tackle zone. So if they're going to roll out south, then they're going to roll into the path of the arriving nines and the arriving players, which either compromises the clear out or compromises the nine passing that ball. So we've been really clear that we have to clear that tackle zone. And that links to us, a notion we're talking about at the moment is setting up the game. So we as referees at any level can do a lot to help the game, give it a chance to breathe, give it a chance to have some continuity and some running rugby in, if we set the breakdown up in particular. And linked to that is the tackler, and then the next focus for us is the jackler. So obviously the refocusing means that the terminology of surviving the clear out no longer exists. So if that jackler gets on the ball and there's a clear lift, then they have to be rewarded if they haven't come up with the ball. But that jackler has to be legal. So what we're saying as a focus area is they've got to clearly be on their feet. They can't go past the ball. They can't have their chest lying on top of the player on the floor. They have to go straight on it, and they have to try and lift. They can't just smother it into the body of the player on the floor and expect a penalty. So while they can win the penalty quicker, they have to do everything right to get that reward, or they need to be penalised, because otherwise they'll just slow the game down.
So they've got to earn it, basically, is what you're saying, yeah?
Yeah, so while they don't have to survive the clear out, they've still got to do a lot to earn that penalty. So yeah, they've got to show us they're genuinely trying to turn that ball over, and they're genuinely trying to be positive. So those would be the two key focus areas that we've got, and it all links to setting the game up. Because if you clear the floor and you either force the jackler to be positive or leave it alone, then you're going to get either great turnovers and counter-attacking rugby, or you'll get quick front foot ball for the attack. So entertainment both ways.
So you talked there about setting the game up, which is great. This hopefully will be seen by a lot of our society referees and new referees coming on to into the role in the next year, maybe two. What does that mean in terms of setting the breakdown up? Is there a particular time within the game you're looking to do that or achieve that by, or is that you're doing that across the whole game?
I think primarily it's like the first 20 minutes should be really hard work for us to get that game set up. And if we've done it effectively, and by setting up the game, I don't mean we just go and blow the whistle constantly. So it can be done through effective bits of chat, either live or at downtime with the players. So it's that balance of communication and whistle is what we mean by setting the game up. But if we've done it well in the first 20 minutes, then in theory, the players should know where they stand. They should know what it is we're after, what we're going to penalise, what we're prepared to reward. And if they work with us on that, then in theory, going forward, the breakdown should start to referee itself. Now, clearly, we've still got to referee it. There'll still be new players will come on, subs will be made. So we've still got to keep refereeing. But if we've done it properly, the hard work should be done in the first 20. And then it's just a case of keeping it ticking over and just reminding the players when they forget what it is we established early on in the game.
Yeah. All right. Brilliant. Thanks, Craig.
I think that leads nicely into my next sort of thought process and question is, you talk about setting up the breakdown there. How much does preparation sort of pre-game contribute to that? And what does your preparation look like around the breakdown?
I think we're lucky as a group of full-timers, we're talking on a weekly basis. We're being assessed or performance reviewed by the same core group of individuals. So there's lots of conversations happening with the same group of people. So it's very easy to be abreast of what's happened in different games, any sort of hiccups referees have had, or any games where the breakdown's gone really well. So I think the prep involves, those communications, those conversations that go on in the week, and the clips that are thrown up that we discuss as a group on our review calls at the moment, which are on Tuesdays. So that's one element of natural prep. And in terms of our own prep, I mean, we know the teams are going to be refereeing at the weekend. We've got a host of analysts, online systems, which allow us to trawl back through however many games we want to look at. And that just gives you an insight. Each team's got their own style. I mean, each team's got their own threats at the breakdown in terms of players. I mean, Jack Willis, unfortunately injured, but I think most people when they hear his name will know he's a prolific jackler and really good at turning the ball over. So you immediately know when you've got threats in the park like that, A, the other team's going to have a strategy for neutralising that threat, and then B, just reinforces to me that if I don't referee this properly today, then I'm going to have chaos at the breakdown. I've got jacklers everywhere, so I've got to clear the tackle first of all. But if I'm letting them not release, if I'm letting them go slightly off their feet, we're going to have chaos at the breakdown. And then everyone's going to get frustrated, and that doesn't just affect the breakdown, it then affects the whole of the rest of the game. So I suppose from a prep perspective, it just puts extra focus on the need to get this right.
And Craig, how does it differ now from previously in your earlier career? So when you were at maybe level 4 or level 6, what did you do at that sort of stage of your career to prep for the breakdown or the games?
Yeah, so the difference is massive. Because at that level, while there is video footage, it's sparse. I don't think you're going to referee the same players necessarily that often, or you haven't got as much video footage on them. So my prep at that level was a lot more generic. So that may have meant I just watched a lot of Premiership or whatever the rugby is. It's all over YouTube. It's all over BT, Sky, the sports apps. Just watched that rugby, and I very much cemented in my mind an image of what do I want to see? What does a good breakdown look like versus what does a bad breakdown look like? And then basically spot the difference on the pitch. And then you referee it from there. So for me, it was more generic at that level. It was more about just the image itself as opposed to getting too drawn into the specifics of the individuals concerned. Because you couldn't, because they change frequently at that level, or there's no footage really to allow you to build up that profile. And look, conversations with referees at that level are massive. A, because you can share experiences beyond just the breakdown, but B, they're probably, whoever ref them the last 2 weeks is probably best placed to be able to tell you where they currently are as a team and what they're trying to do at the breakdown.
Yeah, excellent. Brilliant.
Really, really good points there, Craig, that are relevant across all levels. But now you are fortunate enough to be on the PGMOT, and rightly so. Other than the conversations that you guys have, is there anything that you do to drive consistency around how you referee the breakdown as a team?
I think the consistency piece comes from the fact that you've got us as full-time officials. So we're not just talking on a weekly basis, but we're also working with each other on a weekly basis. So either if we're not refereeing, we're running touch for each other, or we're TMOing for each other. So as part of that, there's a lot of conversations that go on, not just about the games we're involved with, but the games that we see internationally as well. So I think it's that constant conversation across a broad range of topics, which allows that consistency. And because you're on the same page. So when you talk to any full-time referee about what setting the game up means in relation to the breakdown, you should get a pretty similar answer, because we're all striving to achieve the same things through similar means. I think also, as I alluded to earlier, with the fact that we've got the same group of PRs, if we were way off the page as a group of referees, they'd soon be able to sort of point it out to us. They'd soon be able to interject. And then, such as the joy of the system we've got, we'd have a technical meeting with a shed load of clips and thrash out some answers as to why something's gone awry. So I think the biggest example of that was probably attacking off-feet penalties. When these sort of the refocusing sort of points came in around the breakdown, we were nowhere near where we should be after the first 4 or 5 rounds of trying to referee those sort of refocusing when it came to attack off-feet. We had people penalising everything. We had people playing through everything. So we were opposite ends of the spectrum. That's probably the best example where, over the course of 3 to 4 weeks of us having conversations as referees, of our assessors throwing up a lot of clips, that you then can sort of bring the ends of the spectrum together and you meet somewhere in the middle. So yeah, it may take some time to get there, but that's only natural, particularly for community guys, girls who haven't refereed for a very long time. Don't expect to get this right from round 1, round 2 of your sort of restart. Accept it's going to take some time for you, the coaches and the players. So don't be afraid of that. Just enjoy the challenge of adapting.
Brilliant. Thank you, Craig. Let's talk a little bit around positioning. How does, or what positioning considerations do you have around managing the breakdown?
I think point 1 is trying to stay out the way. I ran touch for Christoph at the weekend at Bristol, and he nearly got wiped out 3 times. So, yeah, and then Tempo on Sunday had his foot stood on, much to his delight of BT hearing him squeal down the comms. So, I mean, yeah, stay out the way is obviously the obvious one to start with. But I think you need to see the ball. The ball is king. So you've got to know where that is. And I view it as a massive challenge, because it means you get to run some more. So it's a nice physical challenge, because if you're not in place at the breakdown from the start, then you're asking for trouble, because there's so complicated a phase once you get past dealing with the tackler, and it can develop so rapidly with so many moving components. If you're not there early, you're not seeing it develop. So by the time you get there, or by the time you move to the right side to get a clear view, you may have missed 1, 2 things. So positioning is key. It allows you that sort of that comfort to be able to see the whole thing develop, and then it gives you the confidence to know what's happened and that you've not missed the first offence. So yeah, but it just means a lot of work, which, let's face it, maybe less so when we restart, because it's more likely this summer, but in the winter, I love it, because it means you get to run around and stay warm, which in a cold, wet, muddy game is seldom.
What generally you're covering at the moment in a typical Premiership game that's your standard pace?
So Wayne would tell you that he's mastered every shortcut in the book and is lucky to get above 6K. I'm closer to 10. He would say, because I run around like a headless chicken, I would say I just like really pushing myself to get into the best positions possible.
And if we're talking about breakdown and say let's consider the two of you there, would it be, if we looked at them and say had 3 or 4 clips, would we find that maybe Wayne took up different positions to you, or would you necessarily get to the far side more, and he stayed near side? Is that?
Yeah, so you would probably see me, on the tram lines more closer to the touchline. Not necessarily because you have to be there, but I'd like the challenge of getting there. And there's no harm from getting there if you can. That's probably the biggest difference that you'd see. For us with ARs, it probably doesn't matter that much, because I think at the community level, getting around to the side just reminds players that you're both sides of the breakdown. Yeah. And they haven't got a free ticket to cheat if they're the far side, knowing that you're never going to pop up there. So it probably helps at the community level to get there because you don't have AR help. For us, I still go there because I like the challenge of getting there, but I don't ultimately need to be there when there's an AR who could help if I miss something obvious. Yeah,
I can recall one of my former coaches telling me that you need to try and get to that far side as often as possible. And one of the things he said, look, you need to manage that side of the breakdown, but also it does help you with the offside as well. Is that something that you would consider or did consider when you were maybe down when you were refereeing on your own, no assistance?
I think I primarily got there just to remind them that I was still there, and not just going to stand in field. If the breakdown is, if there's no contest there, then absolutely it gives you a chance to get your head up and look at those offside lines. But you need to make sure the contest's over, because there's nothing worse than looking up, having a beautifully set onside defence, but then you miss, something happens as someone plays the 9, or all of a sudden the ball's picked up and pops up the other side. So again, remember what our priorities are, but if we're happy that contest is over, then an added advantage of being that far side is then you can protect space. And the more space we have, hopefully, the more rugby we get to see, or running rugby with ball in hand at least.
Okay, so your position in a breakdown, is your approach the same for every breakdown, or do you vary it maybe if you're in a different area of the field, e.g. the goal line?
So it could change. I think it may change not just on pitch position, but just the general sort of vibe and way the game's going. So if you've got a poor day at the office in terms of weather, then there's going to be a lot more box kicks. There'll be a lot more pick and goes around the corner. So I think you're naturally drawn into that breakdown because it's going to be contested. There's going to be lots of bodies there. So just from a management and a presence perspective, you want to be on top of it. Whereas if the sun's out and it's a pretty rapid game, or we know that teams are really effective at clearing out threats and there's very rarely a contest for the ball, maybe because one team's decided they don't want to jackal, then you're going to be a lot further away because there's no point you getting close when nothing's happening. So you're going to stay a lot further out, probably between the 2 outside centre, and you'll stay that far out and just pivot through that gap as the play goes on. So more the style of the teams, the weather may be dictating the pattern of play. The goal line's interesting because you need to remember that you not only need to see the ball, but you need to see it then when it's grounded in goal. Yeah. So there's no point you going to stand out over by the centres if they're going to pick and snipe down the blind side, because then you're 30 metres out of the way, never going to see the try. I think there's a lot of factors there that would dictate positioning.
And new this season, again, one of the refocus areas that is relevant to the breakdown, because obviously the box kicks are coming from it, is the focus on players chasing, being in front of the kickers. Obviously different for you because you've got assistant referees, but what advice would you give, or what considerations do you think referees that are going to be working on their own have in managing that when they hopefully restart in a couple of months' time or in September again?
Yeah, so there's a lot of chat, isn't there, about box kicks and the time it takes, and obviously the chase being onside. So I think just make sure we're clear on law. So we can't ask the 9 to use it until the ball is secure. And from then, he's got 5 seconds. So don't go calling it too early and piling pressure on you and the 9. Because remember what the alternative sanction is if you are going to say they take too long. In terms of managing that in front of kick, it's being vocal. So we're now being a lot more proactive in turning to the attacking side and actively sort of managing the guys in close proximity to the nine. Now, again, don't turn your back on the breakdown because you don't want to miss a counter ruck, but it's just opening yourself up in terms of like your chest and your peripheral vision to manage the attacking players as much as the defence once you see they're lining for a box kick. But yeah, I think communication proactive there is our friend on that.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Craig. Just a little question around, we spoke about you love seeing it and we all love seeing running rugby. So when we're looking at the breakdown, how do you have a process, or how do you decide what to sanction and what to just maybe let go to allow that running rugby to continue?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's where the art that is refereeing comes into its own. It's a fine balancing act between knowing when do I just need to blow the whistle and when can I try and manage and talk the ball back potentially. It's interesting. I think, again, it depends on the day at the office. If you know you've got two teams trying to be positive, so you've got positive intent, they're trying to play some expansive open rugby, or they're genuinely looking to contest legally, then I think if you know they're trying to work with you, they're trying to be positive, then you've got more scope to talk to them in that scenario because they're more likely to listen. Versus a day at the office when you just know you've got people who are not necessarily looking to be positive, they just want to slow the ball down, they want to just try and stifle that breakdown, in which case that's the day where you probably default to whistle straight away. But more often than not, it is that balance between, right, you've started legal here, you've tried to be positive, you've ended up now off your feet because maybe you've cleared out. That's the day where you can talk to them off the ball because they started positive. Whereas if they start illegal and they're always illegal, that's the day where you're probably going to go straight to the penalty. But it's not just stopping it, blowing the penalty and saying, right, I've dealt with it. You can then go and tap that player on the shoulder at downtime and be like, look, this is what I need to see. Then I can reward you. So it's not just blowing the whistle on the days where it demands it. It's then a case of trying to proactively then prevent them giving away another penalty. Don't wait for them to come to you to ask that question. You can go and find them and get on the front foot there. And then it's easier to blow the whistle if they go and do it again because you can say, well, I've just spoke to you about this and you've not paid any attention. But yeah, it is the art that is refereeing that balance. And yeah, I think a lot of it depends as to how positive you deem their initial intent is. And if it's always negative, always illegal, then you're more likely to end up blowing the whistle.
Thanks, Craig. I think that's a nice segue into, and you probably just answered it there, but what makes a player hard to manage at the breakdown, and what sort of techniques do you use to manage that, or is it just, as you said there, building that relationship with them and trying to have those conversations in downtime, etc., or have you got any other thoughts around managing a player that might be hard around the breakdown?
Yeah, I think back rows traditionally are the ones that are challenging because it's their job to contest at the breakdown and try and turn the ball over as much as possible. I think it's knowing who those players are, but also it's, as a referee, not viewing it as a threat, but viewing it as a challenge. Because when you've got lots of those players on the pitch, yes, you know it's going to be a tough day at the office, but you should relish that prospect to see how good we are at refereeing and to see how good we are at communicating and managing them. Those are the days that I look forward to because you take past the pressure on, but it forces me, as I said earlier, to be really clear on tackler out the way. Then what's that assist player doing? What's that jackler doing? If you get that balance right, then either through whistle and or through those bits of communication with those players, you normally strike up a position where they'll talk to you, you can talk to them, and they'll very quickly adapt and work with you, and it just leads to a better breakdown for everyone.
That's really, really cool. I really like that, and it's really relatable across all levels, I think, Craig. Thank you.
Anyone in particular, Craig, that you found a real challenge over your career, or anyone you found is a real art at the breakdown? You think, I really enjoy refereeing that person at the breakdown.
Well, I think you look at the current crop of players we've got. So you just the England squad. You've got Curry. I mentioned Willis earlier. Those are the players who are just. I suppose they go in places no one else wants to go to turn the ball over, and they manage to come up with it, and they're really good at it. So you admire the skill set they've got. But you also know they'll push the boundaries as far as possible. And that's where we've got to make sure we're working with them effectively so they know where the line is and they stay the right side of it. Yeah. But they're in the England squad for a reason. That's because they're really good at what they do. And they force us to be better at what we do.
So just one more thing around your sort of intent at breakdown. So you talked earlier around setting a game up and stuff, and you referenced that. You might try and prevent a lot of offences maybe in the first 15, 20 minutes. Do you still try and prevent the same number of offences later on in the game when you're communicating, or does the communication drop off towards the back end because you think, right, I've maybe set this up now and the players should have learned what I'm expecting to see here?
Yeah, it's a good question. And again, it depends on the day you've got. I mean, you can't manage the same offence all day long. So you can't constantly, every breakdown, having to be saying, right, you're off your feet, leave the ball alone. If you're still saying that 60 minutes in, then you probably haven't dealt with it promptly enough, early enough as you needed to. But then if you've dealt with it early doors, it hasn't been an issue for 60 minutes, new players come on, then by all means we can start to remanage the new players on the pitch to a degree. So there's no hard and fast rule on it. Just for us, I mean, obviously for community level refs, it's probably harder to get a voiceover. But if you start noticing that you're saying the same stuff over and over and over again, then I'd suggest the players aren't listening or working with you because you're having to say the same stuff. If it's all sporadic, like off feet here, managing someone out the side there, then if there's no real trends, then they're trying to be good. They're trying to work with you, I'd say.
Okay, brilliant. Right, we're just going to kind of bring this to a bit of a close now, but Craig, we just want some final thoughts from you. So if I was to ask you, thinking about all our referees across the country now at community level, what are the top 3 tips that you would give a referee for effectively refereeing a breakdown?
As I've alluded to, I think you've got to enjoy it. You've got to see it as a challenge. So don't run scared of it. View every game as a learning opportunity. And in relation to giving yourself the best chance at that, as I said, you've got to clear the tackler. So keep it really simple to start with. Get that tackler out of the way and then get there as fast as you can. Because if you're clearing the tackler and you're there from the start, then the rest will just develop in front of you. And if you've got those really clear images of what you want and don't want, the offences you need to get will jump out at you. And if they're not jumping out at you, you can probably play on.
Excellent. Reece, anything finally from you?
Some really relatable points across all levels there, Craig. So no, that's it from me. Thank you.
All right, Craig. Well, look, again, I really appreciate your time and your effort today in joining us for this session. So thanks again for your time. Hopefully we'll see you enjoy many more games this season. And for many years to come, be looking forward to watching you for the next, however long it is you're going to referee, probably 10, maybe.
Whoa, 10 years, steady on.
And I wish you the best, mate. And we'll hopefully catch up again with you soon.
Perfect. Thanks for having me on.